You're listening to the StoryShout podcast, hosted by Kelsey Jones. We're a weekly podcast dedicated to destigmatizing failure and laughing at our normalcy. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the StoryShout podcast. My name is Kelsey Jones. I am your host, and today I'm joined by Mark Traphagen. Mark is a longtime friend of mine, marketing colleague. I think we first met at maybe some digital marketing conferences, and then from there, I've just managed to stay in touch. So, Mark, I'm so glad that you came on today.
Thank you, Kelsey. It's great to connect with you. As we were saying before the recording started, we said, it's been so long, but then we said we say that to everybody these days.
Yes.
For those hearing us who are just, in that period of vaccination and beginning to come out of the shell of COVID. So, it's good to see anyone, and especially good to see you.
Yes, thank you. I know I feel like everybody I've been talking to lately, I've said, I haven't seen you in how long? 2 years, a year? So yeah, it's been great. So I know we picked out something specific to talk about. So what do you suck at, Mark, that you want to talk about?
So many things. The list is endless. But when you sent me the question, I think the thing that came to mind, and I did actually go out, and this is, I think, a great thing to have. I have friends that I trust well enough to go to and say something like, what do I suck at? And you won't hurt my feelings. And they were kind but blunt, which I appreciated. And They kind of corroborated the thing that I was thinking, the first thing that came to mind. And it's the whole area of having to be right, an obsession with being right, and not so much being right myself, although I'm sure that's involved in it, or wanting to think that I'm right about things. I've got the right idea. I've got the right take on everything. But then how that extends into the social sphere, and especially online, of feeling a need to correct something if I see that it's wrong. And then getting so, what my friends observed is sometimes getting so passionate about that, and we get in debate, that I can become not kind. I can become, kind of terse, and I've lost friends on occasion over that. So it's really hurtful. And so it's I've been trying to explore the roots of that and why that need to be right and make sure others are right too. Yeah,
that's a really good one, because I feel like, especially with last year, and last year being 2020, everything with politics and COVID and Black Lives Matter, I think, no matter what side you're on, if you feel passionate about that side, I think it was just in the air, so to speak, of there was going to be a lot of difficult conversations and even arguments online. I mean, it was just the perfect storm. And so it's really hard when you feel passionate about something and somebody's just saying an outright lie, not to want to correct them. Because I definitely have been there too. I mean, I see, maybe it's my mom's friend or my uncle's, cousin that has added me on Facebook, and it's not necessarily an opinion. It's they're saying things that are outright lies. And I totally understand the frustration of just saying, no, that's not even a fact. It's really hard to not do that.
And actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because it helps me make a distinction. Because when I think about this, where I think this is most hurtful in my life and where I feel the worst about it is really not those situations. So if somebody's spreading outright falsehoods or lies or misinformation, I don't feel guilty at all about stepping in and, telling them that's BS or something like that. And social justice issues, things like that. I'll stand up. If somebody cuts me off because of a stand on that, I don't, that doesn't affect me, or that doesn't make me feel bad. Sadly, what I'm more talking about is getting into situations where it's at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. It's silly. It can be an issue in our industry, something like, argument about, I happen to be in the search engine optimization industry, as you have been for many years. And anybody that has any familiarity with that knows there's a certain amount that we know, and that Google and other search engines tell us, or we can, pretty firmly by our own testing and experimentation. But there's huge areas that are just opinion, and it's just
Yeah.
experience, and it's just
Your best guess.
and I have some strong feelings in some of those areas. And I've gotten into, I'm just using it as other areas of life, but I'm just using that as an example where I've gotten into debates to the point of people getting hurt and people unfollowing me or unfriending me. And when I stand back the next day and look at it, I said, like, that was not an issue to kill a friendship on. It was not. That's where it really, hurts in my heart, is when I know I've done that, where I've become offensive and become argumentative to the point where I drive someone away. And it's over something that, sure, it's important to us from an academic standpoint or a work standpoint, but again, not something that's worth hurting someone else over.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I get that. So I don't know if you're familiar, but there's an author and a speaker named Wayne Dyer, and he has so many great books. For anyone listening who hasn't heard of him, a lot of his stuff is about law of attraction, which I totally love. But I specifically remember in one of his books, he said, when you're arguing like that, that's your ego. And like you had mentioned earlier, wanting to be right. So there must be something, not to get too like deep on this podcast, but something like within you that you just want to be right. I mean, maybe, so many people have told you you're wrong for a long time. Or I know for me, as a woman in the industry, there's been times when I've had my opinion in person even, and people have just not taken me seriously and have said it's because I'm a woman. And so I do have a need to feel like I have to prove myself almost by showing that I'm right. And so it can be difficult to pick your battles and decide what's worth fighting about, so to speak, air quotes, online and what's worth letting go. I mean, have you found like a good middle ground, and has there been times where you wanted to argue and you didn't?
Well, I'd like to think I am getting better at that. And I certainly still fail at it. I still slip into it. But it's this self-awareness and the help of friends. I mentioned earlier that I had friends that I went to, but it wasn't totally a surprise what they said when I was talking about this coming on this podcast, because it's things that they've talked to me about before, because they're really good friends and they see this and they hurt for me. They see me getting these situations, and, partners I've had in life and things like that have also, called this out on me. So it's becoming aware of it, and becoming self-aware about it and seeing yourself. So what I've seen, maybe over the last year or so is, I wish it was all the time, but it's not, but more frequently, I think, where I'm able to catch myself, or I'm just about to type that thing in or get into an argument or take it to the next level, or, say something insulting, and I stop myself. And I think for a moment, is that really what you want to say? Is that the effect that you want to have out in the universe? Right. And so I find myself able to catch myself and not do it. And even to the point of like, this is hugest growth, sometimes just not responding at all.
Right.
Somebody comes back with something that I feel like is personal or like that, and just like, you know what, I'm just going to let that go. Anybody knows me or follows me closely online knows I still fail at that, but I think I'm catching it more than I used to. It just, again, starts with kind of just being honest with yourself and self-aware.
Do you think that it being online makes it easier to fall into that trap? I mean, I'd like to think, knowing you wouldn't necessarily have those types of really heated conversations in person, just because I've always seen you as a very calm, like reassuring presence, I guess to say. Do you think it's easier online to get into those so-called unnecessary arguments?
Oh my gosh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like usually I can, maybe count on one hand, if that many, like the number of arguments or fights that I've had that got to the extent that of hurtfulness and disconnection that I've, compared to what I've had online. Whereas online, I've had, more than I want to count. And I think it's that, there's one factor is that, this has been often discussed, is the illusion of anonymity. There have been these studies that show, like aggressive, you can compare it to aggressive driving on the highway. Oftentimes they find like aggressive drivers or somebody who, acts aggressively on the road is somebody like in real life, like people are surprised, like he's the, gentlest person in the world, but there's that feeling of like you're inside this big hunk of metal and everybody else is inside their big hunk of metal. And it's a depersonalization. But I think the other factor of it is that, you don't get the feedback cues, the human cues. If you and I are talking in person and it starts to get a little heated, something like that, I can tell that so quickly, and I can tell that I'm hurting you, or that and those cues. Like, I'm a very empathetic and sympathetic person in person. So, like, when I'm getting those kind of cues in person, I'm going to back off quickly and apologize or back down or calm it down or make a joke, something like that. You don't get those cues online, unfortunately, until it's too late. The cue usually comes when you see blocked. Then oops, and now it's too late. Yeah.
Do you think, and this is probably just my experience, I don't know if you have the same, but I feel like a little more defensive now that I've had, I think 13 years of experience in the industry. So I feel like because I have a lot of experience, if someone tries to challenge me that it maybe just started, I feel like I would be more defensive. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I've literally done this. I would feel a lot more defensive if it was someone that I didn't know how much experience they had, or I know they're newer. Do you feel the same?
Oh yeah. It's so easy to slip into that, talk about ego. Like, do you know who I am? Kind of, like, it was just horrible, to do. But if it's a newer person, they very well may not know who I am, and even to rely on that, like, it's, it's a logical fallacy to say, like, just because, you should allow for something, if somebody's had a lot of experience, something like that, you give them some benefit of the doubt or deference. But just to say, like, I should be listened to in every argument, or, I'm always right because, I have so many more years experience than you is not fair and unfair to that. So again, it's that thing of being able to, it might be a good point to bring up, actually. You mentioned an author in a book that you like, something that's had a profound effect on me in the last year and a half or so. There's a book called Training in Compassion, and by looking for I forgot the author's name. I'm looking over the books right over here, because I always keep it by my side. But it's a book, a guy named Norman Fisher, who is very, very well-known interpreter of Zen Buddhism in the Western mode. So it's a great secular approach to the traditions of Zen Buddhism. And the very title of the book says it, Training in Compassion. It's that compassion for yourself and compassion for others, that being able to step back from every situation you're in and view it apart from your emotions, apart from your, not denying those things are all there,
right,
but being able to take a step back and view everything with compassion and come to it in that way. I've so far from really doing that. But as he says in the book, the main thing is being on the path. And every time you slip, that's a reminder that I'm on the path. When you're on a path, sometimes your foot slips.
Right.
That's okay. You're on the path. And that's the main thing.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Do you think your frustration at people online is because of maybe something that happened that day? Like, for instance, if you were already having a bad day and you saw someone that was objectively saying BS, are you more likely to get into an argument with them because of other things that have been going on in your day? Or does that not affect it as much?
It does. I mean, I'm probably more likely. There's that, that old cliche of the kick the dog syndrome, where, the boss yells at the husband at work, husband comes home, yells at the wife gets, angry at the kids, and the kid kicks the dog. It's like the poor dogs, they're like, what did I do? So, we all are subject to that, but I don't want to lean on that, because I think that can be a crutch to say, oh, that's what it is.
Right.
I'm just having a bad day.
Yeah.
That can make it worse or make it more likely to happen. But I've done it when I'm having a perfectly good day. It's deeper rooted. And I think, we've been talking so much about ego, and it's so rooted in that, I think it's rooted in, and I'm not trying to psychoanalyze myself here, but it's, almost certainly deeper rooted in certain insecurities. No matter what I project of myself as a secure and confident individual, deep down inside, there are definite insecurities and, probably traumas from past experience, childhood, things like that. That one thing you mentioned, I'll just mention this because, you mentioned your experience as a woman in the industry, which is, I see all the time. And probably some people hearing this will know that, I'm queer. I'm out, I'm an LGBTQ plus person, been out for several years, been out public in the industry. And that, finally being out, and I'm in my 60s, has been a tremendous experience and a lot of freedom. But it's also surfaced a lot that, being 40 plus years in the closet, I'm sure there's no way that I don't have insecurities and reaction mechanisms, things like that are from that. And I don't want to blame my behavior on that by any means. But I think it's important to be aware of those things that, it causes us to be, again, as we were talking about earlier, it's so much about self-awareness. The more aware you are of who you are and what there may be in your life, the more you're prepared to recognize it when it's coming up and deal with it.
Yeah, all we all are just sums of our experiences. So everybody's like that. And I think it's hard though, when you see something online that you vehemently disagree with, to put yourself in that person's shoes, because at the time, I've had situations where I'm just like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, where is their line of reasoning? Like, where could they even come from to get that? And I think it is really difficult, especially online, and not knowing people personally, either just with a relationship with them or just seeing them in person, to even get a frame of reference of understanding. Because I think if I have an understanding of where someone could come to that conclusion, then I'm a lot less likely to get really pissed off. But if I absolutely don't even know where they came up with that, it's a lot more difficult to remain calm. At least that's what I've seen in my experience. Very
much the same. Like I get, one of the things that I know can set me off more than anything is illogic.
Yeah.
If I see somebody who's just like using really flawed reasoning and then doubling down in it, that's when I can, it's not, again, wrong necessarily to call that out, but where it comes bad is I can so quickly slip into snarkiness on that and mockery. I just quickly remember an example back in the Google Plus and Google authorship days, which is where, I became pretty well known in the industry through all that. I'm doing some deep explorations on that. We had done, at the company, I was at extensive testing on the whole thing, and feel like we could speak with some confidence as, to a lot of the myths that were out there. There were a lot of SEOs at the time that believed like just being on Google Plus or, having Google authorship connected was just going to do all these incredible things for your ranking. And it just, we knew it to be not true as much as we could know anything. But there was this one guy online who just was absolutely convinced that it was that simple, and nothing you could say could convince him otherwise. And he's just a little, independent SEO, small business, sort of atmosphere. And after a while, like he just it felt like kind of annoying because he just keep coming back with the same argument every time. And I found myself, and joining in with some of my friends in the industry online, just beginning to kind of make fun of him and mock him, and you could almost see our eyes rolling every time he would come into a discussion. And looking back, I feel bad about that. Not that he was right. I'm still convinced he was totally off base, but just how we treated him. And it just reminded me of how I was treated in middle school and, early high school, and by bullies and things like that. And, I don't want to see myself as a bully. So it's a really hard thing to be faced with, that, oh my God, all my life I've fought against bullies and I've thought I'd stand up for the underdog. And here I am being a bully again, that anonymity of online, that's so dangerous.
Yeah. And it kind of comes full circle, just depending on the situation. How have you had your share? I'm sure you have, of trolls, like just people who, you look through their profile and it's obvious they have like 30 followers, on Twitter, and they don't even use a real photo as a profile photo, because that's happened to me a few times, is someone will say something intentionally trying to start something, and I look through their profile and it's obvious that they're just using this as a trolling profile. You don't even know their real identity. How have you handled that in the past?
Used to be very bad. I used to fight with anybody, and it didn't matter if they were a troll or seemed to be a bot or a fake profile or whatever, or obviously
You're ready to go.
I didn't discriminate at all in that area. And then that's the area where it's probably been I've probably been the most successful in recovering in this, is like realizing that a troll is, by definition, is someone or something that's just there purely for the purpose of stirring something up and annoying.
Right.
And there's no profit. And so it's become easier and easier to walk away from that, like recognize that. So it's become kind of a rule for me that to see this is just a troll, like just not engage anymore and not worry about it. Because the thing you have to get past, and this is again where that Training in Compassion book has really helped me a lot, is like laying down ego, is because it doesn't matter that it's a troll who has 2 followers on Twitter, and both of those are robots. That if you don't want them to have the last word, right? They come back with something that's so wrong, and you want to answer it because, and it's like being able to give that up and walk away free and realize, what, 20 minutes later, forget, even like a few days later, that doesn't matter. Like nobody's staying up at night thinking about, oh, that troll got the last word on him. And, so why does it matter so much to me? And letting that just fall off of you is a tremendous freedom. So that's my policy. I probably fail at it from time to time, but generally a policy is like if a person's just obviously a troll, don't engage. You don't owe them anything. There's no real person there for you to try to win over or have a relationship with. It's not the goal.
Yeah, I just instantly block now, because then if I block, I don't go back and see their tweets or whatever. Like it's just out of my brain, and I don't have to, make myself not go see it, because I can't unless I went through all the steps to unblock them.
Yeah. Because it's still a hard thing, isn't it? Like it's amazing how we are as humans, I think part of my, root of where this comes from is like, I believe, I know that I have a deep need to be liked. And I think that's very human. I think, that's saying like everybody doesn't feel like, but particularly in me, like, it's wanting to please people, wanting to be liked, wanting to be thought well of. And you just have to separate the level of absurdity when that gets to the level of a troll, that I would actually like stay up at night worrying what a troll thought about me. It's like not worth it. So being able to, let those things go and then extend that. That's like the training ground, because that's the easiest place and the most sensible place to do it. But then being able to extend that even to with friends and people you do know and people that are real. And having that freedom to not have to have the last word, to not have to correct, dot every I and cross every T, to the point of being annoying, and just, just at some point saying like, we differ on that. Let's just let it go.
Yeah. One saying, and I'm probably going to say it wrong, but it stuck with me, is, are you going to care about this in a month from now, in a year from now? And the majority of arguments or drama that I've seen on, in our industry, on Twitter, or Facebook, or whatever, I won't even remember like a year from now, because it just, we're on to the next thing, or it just really was not a big deal. So I try to think about that as well. Is this situation going to stick with me the rest of my life? And 99.9% of the time it's not. So that's helped me is put it into perspective a little bit.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So to kind of wrap things up today, I know this is something you're working on, which we're not necessarily here to solve, getting over the wanting to be right all the time online. But if somebody else, you saw a good friend of yours in the industry or not struggling with this, if you thought of it from an outsider perspective, what's something that you would tell them?
I'm not much different than what we've been saying here. If there's somebody who I think would want to hear from me and listen to me, I think the first thing is to offer, like, you can't just charge in to somebody's life and say, I think you're handling this wrong. Let me tell you 6 things you need to do to, but, starting with compassion again, hey, I saw that. You can usually get an opening, like, you private message somebody and say, hey, I saw that argument you had online. I felt bad for you. And the person, how you going? And a lot of times that'll be the open. They'll come back and say, yeah, I was such a dick. And I was such a, jerk in that, like, I feel bad about how I did that, or I'm still emotionally upset about it. And then just, opening a door to talk, and then sharing, rather than coming at them with, here's the 5 things you can do to, not
right.
that again, but doing what we've done, what you're doing so well with this podcast. And that is just sharing your own personal experience and saying, like, oh man, like, I am so like that too. I can identify with that. And, here's something that I've been trying to do that's helped me. And I have such good friends that have done that for me. And anything that you've heard today, or most of what you've heard today, if there's anything good or positive that I've shared, it's come from these wonderful friends that I have who will speak truth into my life, and they know they have that open door. And sometimes they have to wait a day or two until I've calmed down. but I've learned from them, and that's how they've approached. They approached out of compassion, and then out of sharing their own failings, their own, which I think this is a wonderful podcast that you're doing, because that's what we're doing here, right? We're not sharing our secrets, sharing our failures, because it's the messages. We all have them. We all do it, and we can help each other because we're all in the same boat.
Yeah. And we might be in different boats, but we're in the same ocean of failures and being human. So, well, Mark, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us. And I really appreciate hearing your perspective, and I'm sure everyone else will too.
Thank you, Kelsey. And
to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us this week. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes and follow us on social media at StoryShout. And Mark, if anybody wants to get a hold of you on social media, not to fight with you, but to maybe, join in on the conversation, where could they reach you?
Friendly people can reach me at just my name on Twitter. Twitter is where I'm the most active and most engaged with people. So it's just at Mark Traphagen, Traphagen, no underscores or symbols or numbers or anything. Or just, put my name in Google. You'll find all kinds of places to find me and find what I do.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you. And until next time, thank you all for listening.
Thank you for listening to the StoryShout podcast. Don't forget to review us on iTunes and connect with us on social media at StoryShout or online at storyshout.co. Until next time, stay normal.